Well, hello, listeners. Welcome to Swords, Sorcery, and Synthesizers. My name's Ben Orchard. I'm coming to you from Adelaide.
And I'm Claire Fitzpatrick and coming to you from Brisbane.
And every now and then we talk over the phone about fantasy movies of the 80s. We look beyond the nostalgia to see what is the key to their enduring appeal. We have only 3 rules with regards to what we cover on this podcast. Number 1, it has to have been made in the 80s. Number 2, it has to have some kind of supernatural or fantastical element that defies rational explanation. And number 3, we have to both find it entertaining, because we're not getting paid for this, are we, Claire?
Sadly not.
Life is too short to talk about boring movies.
Yes.
We hope you find it as entertaining to listen to us, talk about these movies as we did watching them. All right, well, Claire, we've talked about a lot of sort of oddball fantasy movies lately. Things that, people wouldn't necessarily think about when you say the word 80s fantasy.
Yeah.
Or horror movies, supernatural romance, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's about time we go back to something with some honest to God swords and sorcery in it. Something that's a bit more, I guess, obvious in terms of fantasy fiction from the 80s.
Yeah. Although I think a lot of the other films make us unique. But yeah.
I'm sure they do. But recently you watched Ridley Scott's film Legend.
Yeah.
And this is a film that I have a great deal of nostalgic fondness for, having discovered it in my teens at an impressionable age when I was sort of just becoming a cinephile, like just crossing the line from being like a casual sort of moviegoer to someone who had a passionate interest in cinema.
Yeah.
And generally the films of Ridley Scott were a big part of, making me sort of take that leap and make that transition, as it were. But yeah, this is one of those cases where you saw it for the first time just a few weeks ago, was very conscious of how flawed it was. Whereas this is something that I, have a deep nostalgia for, and have probably sort of, I don't know, been a bit more generous to over the years. Maybe we could just say you saw the glass as half empty, I saw it as half full, but at least we can agree it's not a completely empty glass.
Yeah. And I have a lot of respect for it. I think it's obviously gone through issues with coming out and things like that and making the film. However, there are a lot of things that I really did like about it. So totally keen to see both of our perspectives of the film and see how they match up and how they don't.
Well, my nostalgia has its limits. I'm not completely blind to this film's flaws. And, I have this theory about cult movies. Some movies become cult classics because, they're secretly awesome and they just didn't do very well on their first release because they weren't marketed well or something like that. Others become cult classics because they're so bad they're good. But
The Dance.
yeah, that's a good example. But there's a third type, which I call the almost there movies. The kind of movies where all the elements seem in place for a great film to be made, and they're very brilliant in parts, but they just don't come together. They just don't, coalesce. The whole is less than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost there. It's almost great, but not,
That's exactly how I feel about Legend. There are so many aspects of it that I thought were brilliant, but at the end, I thought it just wasn't quite there, but I could totally see the vision and I could see the passion. Um, Still, I think everyone should watch it if you're interested in 80s fantasy films as much as we are.
I guess that's the thing. I feel the same way. I think fans of like almost their cult cinema,
Mm.
as I'll call it now, like when they watch these films over and over again, they tend to focus on the parts that work, the brilliant bits. And
Yeah.
and then they sort of look upon all the flaws as sort of, I don't know, the way you look at like this scrappy dog, this, mutt that's been around that, you still find kind of endearing despite how scrappy it is.
That makes me think of Fry's dog in Futurama. The scrappy dog that waits him forever, and it's the saddest story in history. But yeah, he's sitting there, mangy, pretty feral.
Actually, I think that's a good sort of descriptor of Legend in some ways. Um, Especially the director's cut version. But
Mm.
anyway, how about this? How about I give you like the top 5 reasons why I think Legend doesn't really work on the
Mhm.
whole, and
Mhm.
you can respond point by point to say if you think I'm on the money there, and then I'll tell you like the top 5 reasons why I've kept coming back to it over the years anyway.
Yeah.
You can tell me whether like nostalgia has totally, deranged me or whether like I'm onto something.
Well, as I said before, I still have those rose-colored glasses, and I am deranged about films that are nostalgic and are just not the best. So I completely sympathize with your plight.
Well, I know that there's another film that we both have affection for, which I would describe as an almost there movie, which is Nightbreed.
Mhm.
And I hope someday we'll get to talk about that on the podcast. But
Yeah.
to Legend, this is a film, as you alluded to, that had a very troubled production history.
Mhm.
Uh, Basically, it had a script by William Hortzberg, who was better known as a novelist than a screenwriter. I mean,
Mhm.
his most well-known work is probably Falling Angel, which was a supernatural detective story filmed as Angel Heart in the 80s.
Mhm.
But yeah, he did this sort of fairy tale pastiche, and it was directed by Ridley Scott, who had just come off making Alien and Blade Runner.
Mm.
And the thing is, Blade Runner is generally regarded as a classic now, but at the time, it didn't do that well at the box office and got very mixed reviews. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so Ridley Scott thought, well, I'll do something that's a bit more, I don't know, whimsical and optimistic, and I'll do this
Mm.
fairy tale film, the
Mm.
change of direction. And the thing is, the production, yeah, Murphy's Law ran amok on the set. A lot of a lot of disasters, a lot of accidents happened. At,
Mhm.
I think at one point, like the sets caught fire or something.
I'm gonna say it was haunted. I don't care what people say, it was haunted. Probably.
Anyway, the main thing is that when Ridley Scott presented his director's cut to like test screenings, test audiences,
Mm.
they really hated it. They really didn't like it. And he panicked because
Mhm.
after the sort of, you know, less than stellar reception Blade Runner had received, he thought, "Oh God, if this doesn't work, maybe my career's over."
Yeah.
So he panicked, and
Mhm.
he basically went to the producer, Arnon Milchan, and said, like, "How am I going to salvage this? Like,
Mhm.
the test audiences, they really don't like it." And, I think the producer advised him, "Look, um, the feedback you're getting is that it's too slow, it's a bit, you know, unfocused. So what you should do
Mm.
you should go back to the, like, editing suite and maybe consider cutting 20 or 25 minutes off the runtime."
Yeah.
And he did, and at some point he thought maybe this'll reach a bigger audience if it has a more contemporary soundtrack.
Yeah.
And the original score was an orchestral work by Jerry Goldsmith. Is probably best known for the like classic scores that he did for Patton and Chinatown and The Omen, and
Mhm.
and in the later stages of his career is probably best known for various works in the Star Trek franchise.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Um,
Interesting.
oh yeah, he did like the main theme for Star Trek: The Next Generation and Star
Oh, wow.
Star Trek Voyager, among other things.
That's a really cool accomplishment. That's awesome.
Yeah, but anyway, Jerry Goldsmith's score was scrapped, and they got the German synthesizer group Tangerine Dream, who'd had
Mhm.
who'd had a big crossover hit with the soundtrack to Risky Business,
Mhm.
and they'd done like soundtracks for a lot of other movies as well, and they also got a couple of pop songs on the soundtrack. One was by Brian Ferry, the other one was by John Anderson of the prog rock group Yes.
I don't know who they are, but that's cool.
Well, in the 80s, Yes had made a bit of a comeback with a song called "Owner of a Lonely Heart."
Mhm.
So, I don't know if that was, like, before or after Legend. It was around the same time, I think.
Yeah.
Same decade anyway. But anyway, yeah, so it was released a shorter version with a different soundtrack,
Mhm.
and it flopped. It made no difference. Like
Yeah.
like, cutting 20 minutes off the runtime and putting a new soundtrack on didn't magically fix the movie. The U it flopped in the US. There was there was a different cut of the movie that was released in Europe and Australia.
Mhm.
This version is, slightly shorter than the director's cut, but slightly longer than the US cut, and it keeps the Jerry Goldsmith music.
Mhm.
Um, that was a flop too. So, yeah, it seemed that no matter how they tinkered with it, Legend wouldn't find a mainstream audience. And, so yeah, it was this sort of broken film. And yeah,
Mm.
after that, sort of Ridley Scott turned to directing like crime thrillers for a while, and then
Mm.
he made a bit of a comeback with Thelma and Louise, and then like in the early 2000s made a bigger comeback with Gladiator,
Mhm.
and is now generally regarded as one of the greats. But um, and of course, Blade Runner came to be
Mm.
reevaluated and considered a classic.
I think it's so interesting that we know of these like directors and producers that are so successful, but like we don't know a lot about their work before they found mainstream success. And it's so cool to actually learn about more of their interests and their passions that aren't directly related to things that we know them for. So I would never have thought Ridley Scott would make a film like Legend. So cool.
Well, your Legend became something of a cult film on home video,
Hmm.
and as a result, there was more demand for, like, seeing the original director's cut,
Yeah.
and, the version that I bought on DVD was a double disc set. It had the, director's cut version with the Jerry Goldsmith score on one disc, and it had the US theatrical cut with the Tangerine Dream score on the second disc.
Hmm.
Well, I figured it was just the best of both worlds, and
Yeah.
that way fans could pick whichever version they liked. Unlike with, say, George Lucas's edits of Star Wars, where it's pretty much, you know, his way or the highway, basically.
Yeah. Well, that made me think of Sonny Darko, so directed by Richard Kelly. I first saw that when I was a teenager, and I think I saw the director's cut first. And then when I got a little older, I actually bought the box set, and there was a 3 disc box set, and it came with the both the director's cut and the theatrical release, and then another version of it that had a combination of both, which
Mm.
I found so interesting, and I'd never actually heard of anything like that before. So it was kind of in the middle. So yeah, it seems like with Legend, there was like obviously the difference with music and things like that. Um, and yeah, it's really cool to actually see the director or producers actually main vision for things. And it's interesting to see how that developed over time based on, box office success, based on budget cuts, based on accidents, or just anything really. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
very different films, but a kind of comparison, I think, which I made.
No, that's a valid comparison in terms of like films that were cut up and put that together again. But I guess that leads into the first part of my like top 5 reasons why Legend is very flawed. The first one I think actually has nothing to do with the film itself and has more to do with the fandom of Legend.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any experience with toxic fandom or gatekeeping, or with like fans who take an elitist attitude to like their preferred version of something.
Yeah, I have never heard of anything like that. Like, I know people, speaking of Donnie Darko again, they like either director's cut or the theatrical release, but no, it's not like the, gang who are gonna sort of not beat up the other ones, but just I have never known of anything so antagonistic towards people who have different views. Super interesting.
Well, it's possible that I'm just focusing on a very vocal minority active on the internet.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that the Legend fan base tends to be very bitterly divided among, like, people who champion the US theatrical cut versus people who champion the director's cut. But even more vocally, the question of the soundtrack, whether people prefer Jerry Goldsmith or Tangerine Dream.
Yeah.
If you go onto, like, online message boards on Legend fan sites, or even if you look at, like, the YouTube comment section for the various, like, when people post, like, music videos, you know, of the soundtrack, like, cues from the soundtrack, you'll find in the comment section people arguing about whether Jerry Goldsmith or Tangerine Dream were better, and it goes beyond just expressing a preference for one score or another. It goes into the realm of saying, like, "You're stupid if you like the other score. You are less intellectually sophisticated. You are, and it's sort of it got into nasty sort of attacks against, like, Jerry Goldsmith and Tangerine Dream as well. I remember, like, one, commenter saying, "Oh, if you like the Tangerine Dream score, it's because you can't appreciate the, like, nuanced classical sophistication of Jerry Goldsmith." And, like, Tangerine Dream fans being more like, "Oh, Jerry Goldsmith, he's so conventional. He's so, you just can't handled, like, the cutting edge, experimental electronica of Tangerine Dream, man."
Oh my god, so I mentioned before, like, I'm doing, like, a PhD, at a university, and it makes me think of, like, you have, like, the political kind of parties that are set up around campus, and people who are kind of getting into these little bickering kind of debates of, "You just don't understand this, like, politician's point of view, like, the left or the right." And I find it so silly because it's like, it's not that important, you know? It's cool to have your own opinion and idea, and especially when it comes to a creative work. But it's like, is you're kind of creating a division and why bother? I don't know. It's like, have you got too much time on your hands to sit there and bicker with people over a soundtrack? But I totally understand people's passion.
Yeah,
But
I think with Legend, what I would compare it to is Twilight fans who divided themselves into, like, Team Edward and Team Jacob based upon who they thought the main character's love interest should be, and, between those 2 characters in the love triangle. And
I
with
mean,
with Legend fans, it seems like either you're Team Jerry or Team Tangerine.
um, okay, this is not to like upset Twilight fans, but literally, like, Bella has like the emotional range of a teaspoon. Um, which is something that Hermione in Harry Potter said as well. I can't think of who it was about again. Um, and I'm just like, why are you so invested in this character, this love interest that is like, oh my god, is so superficial. I'm not trying to be mean to Twilight fans. Don't come at me, but yeah, just this kind of nitpicking thing. I just find it so interesting, like so weird.
Yeah, anyway, that's just my number 1 gripe
Hmm.
gripe about Legend. It's nothing to do with the film itself, but sometimes when you've been exposed to people like that and you go back to actually watching the film, or you watch the art that has provoked such discussion, it's hard to sort of put that noise out of your mind and just
Yeah.
lose yourself in the story again. But
Hmm.
anyway, to the story, I think most of my issues with regard to Legend come down to the script.
Hmm.
I've got 3 sort of red marks against it here.
Yeah.
It has a thin plot. It has shallow characterization and sketchy world building.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
That's exactly what I thought as well, and, my mind kept drifting, and I kept having to kind of rewind back to see because 'cause I'd missed plot points, and I think it's just because they weren't really pronounced, and then I kept comparing it to, like, NeverEnding Story, and I was like, it has such a more linear kind of plot line, and it flows much better, and that's one of the things I was like, "Oh, it has so much potential, but I can't follow it," and I felt a bit stupid.
I think
But, like, it's just so disjointed.
I think it's more just that a lot of things are deliberately left vague. Uh,
Yeah.
the main plot, there's this, you know, beautiful but feisty princess named Lily
Mhm.
who secretly loves this, rustic woodsman named Jack, and she sneaks off into the forest to, have picnics with him and, go play with the unicorns and things like that. And then, one day she's kidnapped by the Lord of Darkness, who is, implied to be the son of Satan and is trying to, start an apocalypse by exterminating all the unicorns on Earth, so that the world can be shrouded in darkness forever for reasons. And yeah, and then Jack sort of enlists the help of some fairies and gnomes, and they go off to rescue Lily from the castle that
Mm.
been imprisoned in, and then they have to sort of contend with these, oh no, this goblin army of three that the Lord of Darkness has. Uh, yeah, it's like I'm being a bit flippant, but there's really not that much more to the story than that. And the
Yeah.
like, there's all these background details that are not explained. Like, okay, Lily is a princess. The princess of what? Like,
Mhm.
where's her castle? What's the name of this kingdom that she's in? Uh, and Jack's whole backstory. I kept thinking, oh, maybe he was abandoned as a baby and
Mm.
left in the forest to be raised by fairies and things, and he's like this Peter Pan style wild child figure. He's like a cross between Peter Pan and Tarzan. But
Yeah.
all of this is just implied. It's not actually spelt out in the film, and the thing is, I shouldn't have to make up fan fiction in my head in order to explain the background of a character.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned, like, Tarzan because I had this idea that he was a mixture of Peter Pan, and now that you mentioned Tarzan, I'm like, yeah, it is. This, like, wild boy in the woods. Um, and I thought, "Okay, cool, that makes sense," but I just wanted to know a bit more about him. Why was he there? Like, it didn't need to be an extreme biography of him, but just what was he doing there? Like, how did he grow up? I don't know, like, did he have parents? So, yeah, I just wanted to know that and from there.
The other thing that gets to me is that, okay, I mentioned that Lily and Jack are in love, but we meet them at a point in their relationship where they've already been in a relationship for some time,
Mm,
where we just get these sort of brief allusions to their past. It's not like we don't get to see them meet and fall in love with each other.
mm,
The process of that. It's just as soon as we see them on screen together, we're just told, "Oh, we love each other.
mm,
We've been in love for some time." And, she's setting a challenge for him to be worthy of marrying her, which is to, like,
mm.
throw a ring into a river, and then if he dives down and gets it, then, he can marry her.
One of the things that I thought, okay, so I think I was okay with that. I was okay that they had an established relationship, but I wanted to know how they met. And I think it was really unique. And that was something that I really liked about the film because it wasn't as if like, the princess and the hero meet and fall in love and then get married like all on the same day. It was it was they had established relationship and I was like, cool, this is interesting. This is creative. But it was like, but how did they meet? How long have they been together? Like it was just nothing. And then I felt, yeah, like we because it was never really, like, implied, and we just didn't really get to see a lot of their relationship. It was, like, just literally, like, a theme to tell us more about it would be all that
I mean,
needed.
I have a theory as to, like, why the script is sort of problematic in this regard.
Mm.
I think is mainly because like William Hortzberg, the writer, was really sort of driving outside his lane here. I mean,
Yeah.
I mentioned he's mainly a novelist, and I've read his novels, Falling Angel and Angel's Inferno, the sequel.
Mm.
They're very sort of internal. Like a lot of the, you know, exposition comes through these like elaborate internal monologues the characters have.
Yeah.
When you read Falling Angel, you realize that like the central character is having all these deep thoughts, but he's not very expressive in terms of what he says to other characters.
Yeah.
I think it's telling that the film adaptation of that book, Angel Heart, was written by someone else other than William Hortzberg, and they made the character a bit more extroverted, in order that basically all this information could come out and be shared with the viewer without having a voiceover all the way through.
It actually makes me think of Harry Potter because for people who've only seen the films, in the books, Harry Potter actually has a personality. He's actually very funny and sarcastic, but that doesn't come across. And it's like, even if there were a few things in the script for the films, that would have worked, but there's like nothing. it comes across as just a bit bland for people in the movies, but it's like, no, he's so funny in the books.
I think it's just that well, I can understand that if it's all in his head, then it doesn't really come out. But
Yeah, exactly.
I was
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that well, two things. First of all, I think yeah, William Hortzberg probably just wasn't used to, conveying more of a character's personality in dialogue. But
Yeah.
but also I think it might have been Ridley Scott might have been a bit reluctant to put a voiceover in there because
Yeah.
the previous film he made, Blade Runner, the US theatrical cut of that film had a voiceover narration which was heavily criticized.
Mm.
So he might have just thought, you know, I'll stay away from narration for a while. I don't know.
What I was thinking is one of the things that I would have done, because I'm such a famous director, is had a framing device. So had someone even tell a story and have a framing device of, and that person can sort of like interject and be like, oh, this is sort of like how, a bit more information that we just don't get.
Have
Um,
have you seen a film called The Princess Bride?
a long time ago.
Well, because
Yeah.
that's basically what they did with The Princess.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
framing device was this grandfather reading a bedtime story to his grandson, and
Yeah.
in between like the main events of the story, the grandson would interject with questions and things.
Yeah. Sort of like that. Sorry, sort of like Bastion in their writing story.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
Something like that could have helped like flesh out the world a bit more. I agree.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the direction, and I think that brings me to the fifth and final sort of point in terms of like things going against the film is pacing issues.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter which cut of the film you're watching, it has pacing problems. I that one of the most common criticisms of Ridley Scott as a director, even the great films that he's made, like Alien and Blade Runner and Gladiator, is he's so meticulous in coming up with elegant visuals, and he has a painter's eye for detail in terms of, what he packs into a frame. But it comes at a cost of like he's so such a perfectionist in creating these pretty pictures that he lets the pace, drag.
Yeah.
I I think that's certainly true with the director's cut of Legend.
Yeah.
But
And
but the problem is the US theatrical cut doesn't really make it better. I mean, it takes less time to get from point A to point B, but the cuts made, I don't know, they weren't for the best. Like the US theatrical cut, I think actually feels rather choppy at times.
yes. And so one of the things that I've mentioned quite a few times is that like, I love like color in film. And I think it really enhances like a lot of emotion. And I love the color in this film. I thought Legend had the most amazing color. And it was like, clearly there's an interest in focusing on background things and stuff like that. But I was like, well, but that does deter from the actual plot. and it's really cool and everything, but it's like you're spending a bit too much time on that and less time on the plot. So another thing I was like, "Oh, I'm critical of it, but I can totally see they are so good at, like, visual, aspects of, like, filmmaking."
Well,
Yeah.
I guess that sort of leads into, like, the top 5 reasons I keep coming back to it. If we can pivot to that now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, you just touched upon the first one, which is the, like, painterly visuals. I
Mhm.
mentioned that I think Ridley Scott just generally has a painter's eye for detail, and
Yep.
with Legend, there are so many scenes where you could just, I don't know, pause the DVD,
Mhm.
take a screen cap, print it out, and then, like, hang it on a wall or something. It's just so
Yeah.
it's just so awesome, the visual world that he creates.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. So good.
Yes, and it's just like you every time I come back and watch it, I notice little things, whether it's just like I don't know, the scenes where, you know, the unicorn's killed and winter descends upon the land and people
Mhm.
and there's this clock, uh, on the wall that has these, like, figures that dance around it. Um,
Mhm.
it's all kinds of different things, and I guess it does feel like you watch it, you're losing yourself in another
Mhm.
world in terms of its visual aesthetic.
That's sort of what I felt like with The Hunger. It was like such amazing visual aesthetics, but it worked for me. I think that worked where Legend didn't work that way.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, The Hunger was directed by, Tony Scott, Ridley's brother.
Yeah, yeah.
They both did a career pivot in the 1980s, like,
Mhm.
after making a really dark film, because y Tony Scott made The Hunger, and that was not a big commercial success, so he decided to do something completely different, with Tom Cruise. He did Top Gun.
Hmm.
And then Ridley Scott, he did Blade Runner, which was also, like, not a big hit, and
Mm.
he thought, "Well, I've gotta do something different." So he did this whimsical fairy tale fantasy movie, Legend, with Tom Cruise.
Speaking of Tom Cruise, I thought he was great. Okay, I am actually a massive fan of Tom Cruise's, like, earlier works. Oh, I think he's such a good actor. He may be a bit of an oddball, but, oh, he was the best. And I thought he was so engaging, so charming, and that was one of the things that kept me going, kept me watching, because I was like, "Oh, he has the movie on his shoulders. He is carrying it all." It's really good.
That's the thing, you actually touched upon the second in my, top 5 of why I keep
Yeah.
coming back to it. I think it has a very game cast, and
Yeah.
you mentioned Tom Cruise. I mean, he does give off a lot of, like, man-child vibes even today,
Yeah.
but but that kind of that kind of works for this character, this sort of feral child of the forest, scruffy Peter Pan character who has this sort of youthful innocence to him, but also this sort of quirky off-kilter energy as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just thought it was great. Like, again, like, even though I kind of struggled following the storyline with the visuals and, like, the background, the set scenery, and then his performance, I was like, "This is so good. Why can't the rest of it be good?" Like, I think all the actors kind of put their all in it, were great. It's just, yeah.
Well, the performance in this that most people single out for acclaim is Tim Curry's performance as the Lord of Darkness under
Yeah.
a lot of makeup. I mean, he's unrecognizable under, like, I don't know, red skin and devil horns and, you know,
Yeah.
cloven
I
hooves
would
and everything.
I would not have known it was him. Not at all, and that's amazing. That's such good prosthetics, and that's such good special effects, and just such good acting. Oh, it was so
Well,
cool.
Tim Curry, despite the fact that, he looks so repulsive, still has this oddly suave, seductive quality to him.
That's so cool though, because I think also that allows him and people like that to get such interesting roles that other people probably just wouldn't be suited to. Yeah, I thought he was so cool and just so unrecognizable, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is talent." That's really cool.
Yeah, it also features, Mia Sara as the princess.
Yeah.
for whatever reason, she never became a big star. I suppose the other movie she's best known for is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, also
Yeah.
also from the 80s. But yeah,
Yeah.
Legend was, I guess, her big break. I think it's what people first made people take notice of her anyway.
Yeah.
And I and I
I
and I don't think it's just because she's beautiful. I think that she does actually have an engaging screen presence too, but you can tell me this if you
Well,
think.
yeah, like, I thought so as well, and I kept thinking, that she was very similar to oh god, the name escapes me in The Labyrinth, or, like,
Oh,
Labyrinth.
Jennifer Connelly and
Yes,
Lara? Yeah.
yes. And I thought, wow, they both had the same kind of, like, energy. I don't know, I felt the same kind of, whimsical kind of charm to them.
Well,
And obviously, it depends on their acting experience as well, and I just thought, "Wow, she's so good."
I think it's like the dark hair, the similar sort of physical features, but also
Yeah.
the characters are both daydreamers who, you know, have their bratty moments but they're basically good-hearted.
Yeah, and I thought that was really cool, and it was like, well, I really like Jennifer Connelly. I think she's great. I think she's such a good actress, and I was like, "Ah,
I think
why do they have such different trajectories, such different pathways of their success?"
I don't know, I think a lot of, like, success in show business comes down to dumb luck, honestly. But
Yes.
I was going I was gonna say also that, both the character that, like, Jennifer Connelly plays in Labyrinth and the character that, like, Mia Sara plays in Legend, like, they're both, like, weirdly the object of lust, uh, for, like, the evil overlord character.
I know. How weird. So I think that's really cool, but I find that interesting that that is something that is like a plot device. That's something that people explore in these kind of like fantasy films. And I'm a bit kind of not concerned. I'm like, all right then, all right, it's a bit interesting, but I think it's really cool when actors can excel at that, which I think are obviously testament to their acting ability, but such a interesting character.
I think that sort of brings me to a sort of thematic element that I put down as, like, one of my top 5 reasons I keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever I go back to, like, one of the Grimm's fairy tales and, like, I read those,
Mm.
I notice that there's this odd combination of, like, sentimentality and the grotesque to them.
Yeah.
And with most, like, film versions of fairy tales or fairy tale pastiches, I find that they usually lean very heavily on either, like, the dark side of fairy tales or else they're,
Mm.
like, really, sentimental.
Yeah.
Legend has this odd way of, like, I don't know, playing both the light and dark elements of the traditional fairy tale with equal weight. I mean,
Mhm.
whenever the film is in a romantic mode, like it is like Ridley Scott lays on the sunshine, rainbows, unicorns, fairies, and, frolicking through the forest, it's all laid on pretty thick, all this, light, sunny, lovey-dovey stuff. And then
Yeah.
and then when it gets dark, it is full-blown horror, full-blown, like, gothic, murky visuals, full-blown
Mm.
sort of fire and brimstone menace. It it goes all the way in both the light
Oh,
and the dark moments of the story.
I thought that was so cool. That was an element that I really liked, and it was just like, if only the script and pacing was better. Like, I thought it was so good, that dichotomy. And it only really works in certain things. And I've seen a lot that just don't really work. But I think that that was a really cool aspect to it. And maybe because like being a bit older watching it as well, kind of noticing a bit more. Um, but yeah, I thought that was really cool. And it was just like I really applauded that ability to go really whimsical and beautiful for lightness and then really creepy and gothic, and some parts are pretty scary with the darkness. And I think also if you're watching it when you're younger, that would really be interesting for children's emotions and how they understand these things and how they, if
I would
like, I don't know, people were scared of it with the reviews of people saying that it creeps them out as a kid with the darkness.
I wouldn't know because I saw it when I was a teenager. Like,
Yeah.
I discovered this on video. I didn't really, well, I was too young to see it in the cinema, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I imagine it would be one of those things where, I mean, you were telling me about with Neverending Story, your reaction was sort of like you were scared at some bits and, really saddened by others, but you kept watching anyway because it compelled you and you were just
Yeah.
on the journey. I'd imagine it'd probably be like that for people who saw Legend when they were very young or like pre-teens.
With a lot of these films, I think there is such a great emotional element, and I think that sort of separates as well as other issues with Sedge, but the kind of good ones to the kind of mediocre to the almost there with Legend. That there has a really good mixture of like art, direction, sentimentality, but also emotion.
Well,
And yeah, there was some things where I'm like, I just can almost say if there's a bit more emotion into it and bit more depth to the characters. I think that would be good.
well, I guess that brings me to just like the two final points I have about Legend, which is why I keep coming back to it. And one of them is regards the emotional element of the story.
Yeah.
And it's that most sort of modern film treatments of fairy tales or fairy tale pastiches, they have layers of irony or postmodernism to them.
Yeah.
And I feel that with Legend, it's one of like the last gasps of someone doing a fairy tale film that is absolutely 100% totally unironically hearts on sleeves sincere.
Yeah.
And I think that the weird thing about Legend is that it takes all of these sort of cliched, stereotyped, uh, fairy tale tropes basically and plays them completely straight. But
Mhm.
but not only does it play them completely straight, it's like no matter how cliched it gets, I mean, Ridley Scott treats this with like the awestruck wonderment of a child that's just discovered like a Grimm's fairy tale book for the first time. Like if like pretty much every frame of the movie is like Ridley Scott is saying like, "Do you see how awesome this is?"
That's so interesting because yeah, I didn't really think of that before, but there is this kind of like childlike kind of wonder to it of and I don't know if that was made just to kind of enwrap child audiences. But I can definitely see that. And I think that's another reason why, like you just said, heart on sleeve, and why I think a lot of people can sort of forgive certain elements that just don't work. Because clearly, like the production, everything is so, yeah, so emphatic, so sentimental for heart on sleeve, and so just clearly loved making that film. And
I mean, it's
yeah.
one of those cases where, like, it swings for the fences and misses, but it tries
Yeah.
hard. You sort of it's that scrappy underdog thing that I have. I mean, I have a weakness for noble failures, I guess, but, um
Yeah. It's sort of like you wanna give an encouragement certificate of you always got it. There's so many aspects to it that is great. It's like nearly there.
yeah, which I guess brings me to my final point, which is the elephant in the room, uh,
Yeah.
which is the soundtrack, or
Yeah.
soundtracks, I should say.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Ah, but which one are you thinking of? I think you watched the director's cut version and you tried to watch a bit of the, US theatrical cut afterwards and then just gave up, isn't that right?
Yeah. But the thing is, I do think it's very cool that there's different soundtracks because I think that adds such a different like thematic experience for both. And I do like as I was mentioning before, like the people who are like, I love this one or I love the other one or that was all awful. I think that is like a really interesting thing that I haven't really come across a lot, except for, as I said, like Donnie Darko. So
Well,
really cool.
okay, well, I'm gonna make my controversial statement of the day, and I expect we'll probably get hate mail for this, for me saying that. I actually like both scores equally. They're not better or worse than each other, they're just different. That's my take on it. I
Yeah.
I love the sort of sweeping romanticism of, Jerry Goldsmith's, like, very old-fashioned orchestral soundtrack. I think it has a, marvelous classical grace to it, and,
Mhm.
especially the love theme is just so tender-hearted, and, uh,
Yeah.
it incorporates all of these sort of vaguely Celtic, like, folk elements for the fairies and their realm as well, which is I really like, and the sort of elegant waltz he comes up with for when the Lord of Darkness presents Princess Lily with this black dress, and
Mm.
she dances with it, and it seems like she might succumb to his seductive charms, and there's this sort of vaguely unsettling, like, waltz theme that, Jerry Goldsmith came up with. It's just really haunting stuff.
Mm. I think that's really cool that obviously with different types of music, create different emotions and both, that scene with both different soundtracks. Do you think like maybe it just, you know, it changes the interpretation of it for viewers if they've only seen one or the other?
I have a theory about that, and I'll get to it. I just wanna say a few words about Tangerine Dream as well, because
Yeah.
I think what they did was very interesting as well. I mean, they incorporated a lot of, like, I don't know, Eastern sounding instruments for their version. There's sort of what sound like tablas, there's sort of pan flute themes for the unicorn, uh,
Mm.
when Princess Lily is sitting by the river and, holding out her hand to the unicorn. There's this really sort of delicate flute and synthesizer theme that plays. I mean, there's some very sort of, I don't know, electric guitar power chords and,
Mm.
for the sort of more heroic moments, where Jack is sort of storming the castle and things like that. And, I actually really like the 2 songs that were in this movie. Like, "Loved by the Sun" is the John Anderson song, but "Is Your Love Strong Enough" by, Brian Ferry is
Mm.
is really cool. And funnily enough, that song, "Is Your Love Strong Enough," was later, like, reused for, the English language version of "The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo" that David
Oh.
Fincher made. It was a cover of the song, but yeah, it was "Is Your Love Strong Enough" was on the soundtrack for that too.
Oh, I did not realize that. Like I've only seen so I'm a really big fan of the books. Mainly the original like trilogy. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So that's interesting. Like I do prefer the Swedish movies, but that's cool. Yeah, I think that's very unexpected. That's really cool.
Yeah, anyway, about the soundtrack and about preferences, I have a theory that most people just prefer whichever version they saw first. And
Yeah.
you know what they say, you never forget your first.
Yeah.
And, and I think there's this nostalgic element to whichever cut of the movie that you saw first and whichever soundtrack you heard first. Reading between the lines of a lot of the reviews and comments that I've read about the scores,
Mm.
people tend to be loyal to whichever one they saw first.
Well, that makes me think again of
And
Donnie Darko.
yeah.
Yeah, makes me think of Donnie Darko because I saw the director's cut, and obviously that had a different soundtrack. And then when I got like the 3 disc box set, and then I heard the theatrical release soundtrack, it actually just changed the tone a lot.
Mm.
And I think it changed. Like I totally see why people are like one or the other, and like I get that completely. So with stuff movies like this as well. It's like I get it, I understand it. And so before, I don't know why people are so crazy.
Okay, well, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I can tell you what basically the main criticisms of both scores are.
Yeah.
People who prefer the Jerry Goldsmith cut tend to say that the Tangerine Dream version, the presence of synthesizers and electric guitars and Eastern instruments kind of clashes with the, like, I don't know, Western medieval visual aesthetic of the film.
Yeah.
It just seems anachronistic in that respect. Whereas people who prefer the Tangerine Dream, score tend to look at Jerry Goldsmith's orchestral music and say, "Oh, this is so conventional, this is so traditional, this is
Mm.
just typical of what you'd expect from a fantasy movie," whereas what Tangerine Dream's doing is more experimental, it's something, alien and different and distinct,
Hmm.
much more so than, just another orchestral soundtrack for a fantasy film.
Yeah. And I think also that shows like the dedication to make it different and unique. and having a unique soundtrack is it's really cool, and I think a lot of people don't do that these days. But again, I can totally see how they create the divide as well, which is silly. People are dumb. Not really.
Well, okay. If you put a gun to my head and force me to choose, I'd have to confess that like of the two cuts of the film that are out there at the moment, uh,
Mhm.
the one that I've watched the most is the director's cut with the Jerry Goldsmith score.
Yeah.
Mostly because I just think the character development is slightly better,
Mm.
because it's got more more footage. But I just think that within the context of the film, the Jerry Goldsmith music works better.
Yeah.
But I own both soundtracks on CD, and the one I've listened to the most independently of the film is the Tangerine Dream soundtrack. And it's probably because it's more gently melodic, whereas the Jerry Goldsmith score contains a lot of like dissonant suspense music.
Mm.
But for the more like horror, the more dark scenes in the film.
Mm.
Uh, Whereas the Tangerine Dream score, the equivalent music is more eerie, and generally it's a much gentler score, and it makes for like better easy listening music away from the film. Put it that way.
Yeah. And I think that's actually cool because it makes me think of how some people will watch a film, depending if it has a different score, different soundtrack, and then go away and listen to it independently. So it also like I love the Philip Glass, like Candyman soundtrack. And I like it so much that I actually went out and bought the record back when I had a working record player. And every now and then I actually still listen to it like on Spotify because I think it's such a unique piece that people can enjoy independently of Candyman. But it seems like it's similar for you as well.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, like I said, I think it just conjures up a certain atmosphere, and I think that's the thing. Legend is a film of atmosphere
Yes.
more than a story, a coherent story. But it's
Yeah.
like I said, I still have an affection for it. It's almost there,
I
and
totally get it.
I just enjoying that sort of half-empty glass of wine, I guess.
Yeah. I totally get it, and I have that for so many other films as well. So many films where people are like, "Really? You like that?" I'm like, "Yes." There's so many elements, so yeah, I completely understand why you love it so much. And I'm so happy you're okay and not gonna drag me into the bushes because I didn't like a lot of some aspects.
I know that we made it a rule that we'd only talk about films that we find entertaining, but the thing is, entertaining isn't necessarily the same thing as good. And
Exactly.
the other thing is, like, the fact that we could spend an hour talking about this and not get bored is
Yeah.
it's got something for it if we can do that. And
Yeah.
I'm not really sort of resistant to negativity itself. I am only bothered by it when it's used as just like a tool for clickbait or trolling people or things like that. You know,
Me too.
like
There's no reason to be so negative about things. I totally think you can have your own opinion, but it's like, be nice. Don't be a dick.
well that's good advice. And yeah, on that note, I guess we'll wrap things up. I mean, I had a really fun time talking about Legend with you, and I'm glad
Mm.
you seem to have it was a good conversation starter anyway.
Yeah, as I said, I really did like it. I like so many aspects of it. Just didn't quite work, but I did really like it. Yeah, it was really cool.
Almost there. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Claire.
That's all for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have any questions or would like to provide suggestions for future episodes, you can send an email to fantasypodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.